Ulonga tabati yada tó yẹ kó máa da ifá. Inú tó yẹ kó jẹun lọ fi bí pa. Ọba tálá, ọba takuntakun. Ṣàngó, Èṣù, Ògún, Ọya, Ọ̀ṣun. Ìwọ ló ń bọ̀ nílé yìí. Kí ni ṣẹ̀ṣẹ̀ tán ṣe nílé yìí o? Ó jẹ́ lọ jára rẹ̀.
Alafia, peace and blessings. Welcome to another episode of the African Spirituality Experience. I am your host, Arisha Bami, and today we're doing a midday show, man. We got a very special surprise for the tribe, man. A new guest who I feel like is going to make a huge impact in regards to not just the amount of information, but the dissemination of information in which this brother is going to drop. So I'm looking forward to this conversation. I know it's going to be a dope one. So without further ado, peace and blessings to you, family. I want to introduce Dr. Biton Kurt Young, the Associate Professor and Chair of the Dr. Mac Henry Jones Department of Political Sciences at Clark Atlanta University. Peace and blessings, brother. I appreciate you for joining us today.
Yeah, greetings, and thank you so much for joining this conversation. I get excited anytime there's an important conversation around Pan-Africanism, and certainly even more excited on a platform like yours, brother. I'm excited to be here, and I'm looking forward to getting into the conversation.
I appreciate that, man, for sure. And it's been a long time coming. I've been hearing about you for a minute now. So shout out to Baba Zo, and shout out to your brother Baba Oyabile for the introduction before the introduction. So I've definitely been aware of your work and the type of work and how revolutionary your work is and what you're doing at Clark, man. So I definitely appreciate you, taking the time to stop by and to build with us and to build with the tribe.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, you mentioned some important names that are near and dear to me.
Yes,
both by blood and by organizational work with Brother Zoe.
Yes, sir.
So, I appreciate that. That makes me feel even more at home now.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And shout out to Baba Wally Shabazz, too, because he came and burned this thing down last week.
Yeah, I love that brother dearly.
Yes, sir. The general. Yes, sir. That's what's up. So let's just get right to it, man, because I know there's a lot to discuss, and I'm going to do my best to maximize this time, man, to make it divine alignment and divine time. So with that, when it comes to your profession and what you do and what you have been doing for a minute now, what do you feel like is the most significant aspect of education for people of melanated descent, both here in the diaspora and also, on the continent of Africa?
One word: liberation. Right? And of course, we talk about liberation in sometimes comfortable and uncomfortable ways, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes when we use that term, it can mean something that seems so insurmountable.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But what we mean by liberation is to be free, right? To free oneself. And for a long time in our community, we've always had the narrative that one of the most important functions for group education or the educating of African people is that education becomes a way of elevating us, progressing to some higher state of existence, some state of being, some higher level of community development, community empowerment, some higher level of personal advancement. It's not a fancy language. The key is education. So, but education for what? Right now, this complicates the question and the answer a little bit, right? Because we don't exist in a vacuum. We don't exist on an island. We exist in the context of human relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the relationships that we've had is a relationship where all of the mechanisms of existence have been used to suppress, oppress, and repress us. And so one of those important instruments was the instrument of education. It was illegal by law, by statute, to educate an enslaved African.
Mm.
And I'm going to limit this part of the answer to the American experience, right? I don't want to limit the whole conversation to the American. I don't want to Americanize the discussion on African liberation, right?
Right.
But certainly in the American experience and other parts of the diaspora, it was supported by law and punishable by law to educate an African.
Mm.
And so we must struggle, as Hashim Jabril says, we must struggle for our total liberation. We must struggle against the totality of our oppression.
Mm.
And so therefore we can fight to remove the shackles, we can fight to remove the beatings and what have you, but we must also fight to remove those kind of mental shackles that were placed on us. And a way to do that, not the way, a way to do that is through education, whether it's some kind of formal education or other types of education, as long as it's geared towards the liberation of African people. All right. And so, yeah, all I'm saying here on one level is that education has been used as an instrument against us. Think of it like this. There's a question that a scholar in Atlanta named Danny Boston, he wrote a book called Race, Class, and Conservatism. And in this book, he asked the question, what was most damaging, to brutalize the enslaved Africans, but to give them some nominal, some limited level of education, or to educate them, but to not brutalize them, but to render them totally uneducated. Right? However you answer that question, it speaks to the profound role of education in the way that they that those who sought to dominate us sought to perpetuate that domination, right, through education. Now let's expand it. Let's globalize it. The role of education as a liberatory force also has diasporic implications. It was no coincidence that along with the military agents of colonization, along with the economic agents of colonization, such as charter companies and concessionary companies, along with the geographical agents of colonization and imperialism, such as the geographical mapping agencies and what have you, all that had a role in the colonization of Africa and African people. Alongside all of them were the missionaries who played a role in the educating of African people. All right. So once again, if you have all of these mechanisms being used to ensure our domination, right? Military force, economic forces grounded in corporations and other kind of economic interests, forces associated with the mapping of the African continent, such as those geographical societies, right? And then the religious entities, such as the missionaries, who had a key role in the educating of African people, right? But education for what? Education for service, education for work and production, and then education to totally warp and distort the mentality of African people, right? The psychological impact of African people, the psychological impact on African people, let's be precise. And so it leaves me no other way to think about what education is to serve. And then one last piece, brother, we should ask a very basic question about those who seek to dominate us. Right? In any society where, quote, public, unquote, education, quote, unquote, is being used, what's the function of public education? Why is it that your mom and my mom, your dad and my dad would have been in trouble if they did not send us to public school, or at least to some kind of school? If they just kept us home, didn't do any school, any homeschooling, didn't go on record to be engaged in any homeschooling, they would get in trouble with they would have legal challenges. Why? Because it is incumbent upon a society to compel its education to engage in some level, compel its citizens to engage in some level of education. And quite often the education that the society deems necessary is an education that fits those being educated in a specific function within the society.
Indoctrination.
It's indoctrination, right? And what we're seeing now, coming out of a certain level of struggle in recent decades, African people, among others, been able to push back on that socialization process to introduce into the educational process some level of self-expression, right? Now, we should not be surprised if we know that education functions the way that it is in terms of a political instrument. We should not be surprised with the kind of pushback that we see and taking place in the society in general, and certainly here in the state of Florida, where I am right now, where it's cloaked in the disguise of anti-wokeness or an attack on critical race theory. No. What's at play here is the use of the politicizing of education as an instrument to maintain the domination of one group over another group, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all I'm saying here is when you look at it from those three perspectives, education plays a critical role beyond simply earning degrees and getting grades and what have you. It has to play a certain social and political function for a group and the society to which it tries to address itself.
That's facts. Yeah, no, that's real. So, and all that goes down to, indoctrination. I remember the very first time that we spoke, the first time meeting you, officially, we spoke about a lot, and it was a very powerful conversation. So within that, I recall we spoke about a lot of different books that came up. And one of my books that I remember referencing during that conversation was this masterful piece of work right here called The Island of Memes by Dr. Wade Nobles. And I recall speaking about us, the topic coming up about what is this thing called a meme, right? But a meme is something that's been utilized and used long before social media, long before these posts and all these things that we know as memes now. It's been something that's been done for a long time to make sure that we have been properly indoctrinated, i.e. the miseducation of the Negro by Carter G. Woodson, that whole entire philosophy of this thing that they call education, but for us, it's indoctrination. So how significant is it for us as a people to be able to truly visualize and identify our lineage and from, the saying, it's not, you got to know where you're from in order to get to where you're going, right? Yeah. So how important and significant is it for us to know our lineage and who and where we come from in regards to where we're going to?
Yeah. First, I have to echo what you said. I just ordered it. Literally, when you and I talked about it, literally just came in the mail. Just delivered. I'm kind of old school. I said it came in the mail. It was delivered by
Man, listen.
It was delivered to the front porch,
Yes, sir.
They don't even put it in the mailbox anymore. They just drop the box on your front porch and keep it moving.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just read that book. I just received it. I haven't had a chance to read it yet. I'm doing some research on that involves challenging some established perspectives on the Haitian Revolution. And so I'm going back and I've gone back and reread C.L.R. James' famous book, The Black Jacobins. Just read for the first time Amy Cesaire's equally important book on the Haitian Revolution titled Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution. It was written in French from the 1960s and just translated to English, so I had to grab it. And now I want to look at, I'm skipping over one, and then I also reread, probably for the fifth or sixth time, Jacob Carruthers' piece on the irritated genie. And then now I want to look at bingo. That's it right there, and look at Baba Noble's book that you have there, and draw some critiques, comparative analyses, and mapping out a more holistic and to be honest with you, a much more African-centered understanding of the Haitian Revolution than that which we received from previous publications that we've been told to be. And listen to this. Those pieces that we've been told to be the definitive writing on the Haitian Revolution, right? Although he's one of our beloved ancestors and freedom fighters, I had some serious challenges with what C.L.R. James framed the Haitian Revolution. And so I'm looking to critique that now, because I came into, as most of us, an understanding of the Haitian Revolution very late in the movie. And so let me use that metaphor. To answer your question, transition to answering your question. Imagine going to a movie. You've been told that it's a great movie, that you got to listen carefully. Those kind of movies that it's rich and dense, which means you can't just be visually entertained. You have to listen. And you have to think while you're watching the film, right? And so you've been told this about the film, much as we've been told about the Haitian Revolution. But when you go watch the film, you get there with 5 or 10 minutes left. And then you try to watch the film from 5 or 10 minutes left. And then at the end of the film, when the credits go up, you think you've left with a total understanding of the film. And absolutely, you've missed everything.
Yep.
Right. Even if the concluding scenes are profound, you have no context. You have no framework to understand the meaning of the last few scenes that you were able to watch. Well, think of it like this: the movie that we as a people have gone to watch, knowing that it's an important movie, knowing that it's critical for us to understand this movie. The movie is our movie. Is a movie that's about us, right? In essence, we are there watching the movie. We're watching ourselves as they're watching this movie. And of course, we begin with the assumption that no one knows ourselves better than ourselves. But you are here watching a film about us that doesn't even begin from its source. And this speaks to the importance of understanding one's lineage, the way you frame the question, the understanding of one's lineage, to truly have an understanding of the film that we're watching about our existence, right? So why is it important, for example, to go back and track down one's origins? It doesn't mean that we all have to be, trained anthropologists or trained historians or trained archaeologists. No, not necessarily. We believe in the Sankofa principle, right? The grounded in the Akan tradition, which is, it's a very important and powerful symbol of the bird, face forward with its head turned back with an egg in its mouth, right? Which symbolizes in the Akan tradition as an Adinkra symbol, moving forward or going forward with knowledge and understanding of one's past. Right? So this notion of tracking down one's lineage is grounded in the way we understand ourselves culturally. All right? But it's only because, and kind of connecting the first question, is only because we've been thoroughly miseducated, as Carter G. Woodson said, mal-educated, beyond being miseducated, deliberately mal-educated. We have an additional political struggle to reclaim our understanding of our lineage, right? And so no matter what our walks of life is, this just becomes an important commitment that we have to make. And so what that means is that we go back and understand how we got here. We understand it on two levels. What are the major patterns of migration or forced migration that's been imposed upon African people? How do mass numbers of African people end up in Belize? How do mass numbers of African people end up in the United States? In the UK, right? What is it that triggers these either forced or mass voluntary migration, right? And then from that general level, we find ourselves, our own line, hence the word lineage, in the analysis, right? So once we have a broader understanding of how African people get to the Caribbean and where on the continent did some Africans go and end up, we then have a platform that we can then analyze our own personal lineage or the lineage of our families, right? Which kind of helps us connect the dots and have a better understanding of ourselves in addition to an understanding of our people, right? And it's becoming even more possible now, even more promising now than it's ever been, I would argue. Maybe with the exception of the moment where we still had a direct memory. We talked about the Haitian Revolution. There's a term that's, I guess, a couple terms that's been used to talk about some Africans in Haiti by some historians and anthropologists who refer to those Africans as being either saltwater Negroes or Guinea Negroes, right? Those Africans, because of the nature of slavery in Haiti, you had Africans who would be coming into that particular island rapidly, right? All the way up until the eve of the revolution, Africans are still coming in, right? And so I would pause for a minute and say that among those Africans, there's a richness of the memory to be able to reconstruct the lineage. But since then, we are only at a point now where we have so much access to information, right? So much access to a deeper understanding of areas of study such as geography, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a critical part of lineage tracing, understanding the notion of world geography, and be able to, as John Henry Clark say, locate ourselves on the map of human geography, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Powerful statement, and that's something that's, again, broadly spoken, but it's also something that's deeply personal in our own discovery of ourselves on that, again, map of human geography.
That's sure. Yeah, no, that's powerful. And one other piece of work too that you might want to check out is I I think she just dropped a new book. I'm trying to get a hold of her, but it's called Sheroes of the Haitian Revolution by Professor Baina Bello. Very
Yes,
powerful
yes,
piece,
yes.
man.
I'm familiar with that sister. She is awesome, man.
Oh,
She's yeah. So I haven't seen that piece, so I'm looking forward to you sharing that with me, so I can
yes, sir.
get that
Yep.
closer. Because you're right.
Yeah, I
She's
sent it
right.
to you.
She's right. That history needs to be retold on many levels, right?
Oh, yeah.
Both of those two pieces, both C.L.R. James and Amy Césaire, again, freedom fighters,
Yeah.
devout ancestors to our struggle. They didn't mention the sisters. That's a
Yes, sir.
problem. That's
Yeah.
a problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Because they played a major
Just,
role.
we kind of flowing now. And remember now, the one of the key actors of the Haitian Revolution were the Maroons.
Yeah.
The Maroon societies, right? African people. And we know that the Maroon patterns in Haiti, in IT, is not much different from the patterns in places like Jamaica. And if Jamaica is going to have a Queen Nani, well, who are our sisters immersed in struggle in Haiti? I can't tell you. I know the answer to that. And I've studied this thing for a good part of the last few decades, and so there's they say the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, right?
The more you learn, the more you realize there's so much more to learn, man.
Exactly.
That's real. Yeah, nah, she killed it with this book because it's made like a children's book, so it has the pictures and the illustrations and all that, but the information is still is priceless because it gives us an inside lens or scope or insight behind the scenes from someone who actually grew up there. You know what I'm saying? Born and raised in Haiti and a masterful historian. So she dropped a lot of jewels in that one. The only ones that I remember was Cecilia Fatima, who was, I believe, Dessalines' teacher, if I'm not mistaken. And so I remember them talking about her, and there's a few others, especially the 1804 documentary is a dope documentary. That's probably my favorite documentary of all time, possibly because it was a profound piece of work, man. And we've been blessed to have several of the guests, here at the channel, man, to, grace the Ashe streets, man. So it's like I give thanks for all them, that paved the way for us, up until this day, man. So with that, when it comes to this thing called Pan-Africanism, I know that you were, a fan of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, such as myself as well. And I know the whole, I feel like I have a strong sense of how impactful the whole Garvey movement and the whole Pan-African movement is or was, on your approach to not just education, but Pan-Africanism. So can you kind of share with us what your own personal, I would say, perspective is of Pan-Africanism and how that's relevant for us as a people today?
So, wow, that's going to take me a minute to answer that. So,
you got time.
I try to be disciplined. I try to be disciplined, and I try to make it, as Malcolm X would say, make it plain. We had a conversation at some point that I should elaborate a bit on. There's a sort of a natural, organic response that comes from Black people to adversity. Whenever we're in a collective space or in a collective posture, there's something that comes almost naturally for us. And it sounds something like this. Again, when faced with adversity, we'll either lament, we'll say something like, man, all Black people, we just can't come together, which assumes that we want to come together. We will say things like, man, if we can just pull together as one, right? If we can just stand together, right? If we can just express some feeling of oneness, right? Damn, so much that we can do. What I'm saying is that this is a natural tendency that you see happening time and time and time again. And it doesn't come from the intelligentsia. It comes from our people. It comes from among the masses, right? And so I begin with a deep love and appreciation for Pan-Africanism because of a number of critical assumptions. Number one, this is something that has been created by African people. We didn't always call it Pan-Africanism, but this sense of oneness, this sense of belonging to one another, this sense of connectedness to one another is something that has stood the test of time. It's always been with us, and it's manifests itself in the various cultural expressions that we have, right? So those are two things. This is kind of expression of our personality, our collective personality, that manifests itself in our culture, right? And we know culture. Let me take a minute to define culture. I don't mean culture simply in terms of song and dance and cuisine and garbs, right? I think of culture like the deoxyribonucleic acid of a people, right? The DNA of a people, that which gives a people a sense of collective being, a sense of collective identity, right? As African people. And so what we're saying is that this sense of oneness, this sense of belongingness creeps into and animates the culture, right? So our various cultural expressions have built into it what Sheikh Adijab calls a kind of cultural unity of Black Africa, right? We then have a dynamic in our group, in our collective, among our people, where we go through, and this kind of speaks to the first couple questions that you asked, where we go through a process of self-realization, self-understanding, right? Self-knowledge, especially when the lack of self-knowledge is a part of the political conditions that we are fighting against, right? When we struggle, we begin to dig up our past. There's an important essay written by Arturo Schomburg in the 1920s as a part of the Harlem Renaissance. I would argue one of the most important pieces of the Harlem Renaissance. It was an essay that he wrote titled "The Negro Digs Up His Past," right? And this becomes one of the definitive elements of the Harlem Renaissance. Yes, it's a period of literary explosion. It's a period of great migratory patterns from the South to the North. It's a period where we begin to see artistic expression, right, in terms of sculpture and paintings. All right, we all know, well, we should know those famous Lawrence Jacob paintings that deal with the migrations and et cetera, et cetera. But it's also a period of a new understanding of our African source, our African origin. Right. So when you look at the major expressions of the Harlem Renaissance, you are seeing Africa being reintroduced on African people's terms, right? And then you begin to see the politicizing of that recollection, or the politicizing of that historical identity and consciousness. Right? In other words, we don't just begin to remember what we had forgotten. We don't just go back and reclaim that which was taken from us. We begin to organize ourselves politically around that new understanding. All right. Then we begin to build organizational work that's dedicated to actualizing what we understand to be ourselves, our condition, and the forces arrayed against us to prevent us from being human beings. We begin to organize and build. All right. And then after we begin to think about how we organize, we begin to think about what it is that we want to recreate. How do we introduce a new way of understanding how Black people exist, not only in our own narrow spaces, but how we exist in relationship to one another, and how we exist in relationship to the entire planet. How we exist in relationship to the world. Right. And then we engage in liberatory struggles to actualize those new levels of understanding. In other words, we begin to struggle, right? We begin to engage in various types of political struggle. All right, so what I'm saying is that all of these represent what I understand to be Pan-Africanism. These are all elements of Pan-Africanism, right? This realization that we exist all over the planet, right? This, using the Harlem Renaissance as an example, this beginning of understanding ourselves and where we exist in human history. We begin to consciously locate ourselves as a part of the African family. We begin to organize ourselves, and then we begin to engage in struggle to reconstitute ourselves according to what it is that we want to do. This is what we mean by Pan-Africanism. This is how I understand, and my work is dedicated to understanding Pan-Africanism. And this is important, brother Bemi. Not understanding Pan-Africanism is simply holding hands and singing Kumbaya, right? You know, just unity for the sake of unity. You know, I do agree with what Baba Clark said, right? Baba Clark said if Black people ever came together in unison to do anything, even if it's a wrong thing, we could change the world, right?
Yeah, that's facts. That's real.
I agree with him on that point.
That's
But he
real.
made that point, I think, back in the 1970s or the 80s. I'm sure if he was still with us now, he would want us to graduate a bit beyond what he said, though. So we should add a little bit more to what he said and not just live in his exact words back then.
Right.
So we should. But my point is that Pan-Africanism is not just these simple terms, right? Another term that becomes more, I guess, prominent, more popular is thinking of Pan-Africanism as the unity of African states, right? Unity of African governments. I mean, that's important, right? We live in a world right now, at this particular moment, where states have power. Power is concentrated in these political formations that we call states.
Right.
And we can't wish them away and act that they don't exist, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as long as they have power, we have to deal with states, and African people are in possession of some of these states, notwithstanding their contradictions, right? Human beings are organized in these spaces called states, so we have to grapple with them, but that is not the definition of Pan-Africanism, right? So therefore, the contradictions of heads of state in betraying Pan-Africanism is not the betrayal of Pan-Africanism, right?
Right.
So I don't accept that, because I don't accept the definition and seated or resting totally in their hands.
Right.
Right. I would argue that there's a more deeper and a much more complex and widespread diasporic history of those 5 elements that I mentioned a moment ago, defining Pan-Africanism, than what we see just between just a grain of sand on the beach of time, right?
Yeah.
That grain of sand is a period of time between 1960, maybe 1950, to now, right? As a period of time where we have the existence of the African nation state as a modern political unit. We can't define a generations old phenomenon such as Pan-Africanism on the behavior or misbehavior of African heads of state. But to answer your question a bit more directly, to me, I believe that we have no other option. I don't embrace Pan-Africanism just because I like feeling good about it. I don't believe that African people in any part of the African diaspora can liberate themselves outside of a relationship with other African people struggling to liberate themselves. I don't see evidence. I'm trained as a social scientist. Sometimes that's problematic, but sometimes it's useful. And it's useful in the sense that we can ground our prescriptions for the advancement of African people on concreteness, right? Something that we can demonstrate to be of some valid use. I don't know that I've seen the evidence to suggest that we can liberate ourselves apart from ourselves. I don't see it. All right.
So you're saying, I'm sorry. No, I was gonna say, so you're saying if you don't have a unification of Africans, melanated people across the globe, not just, let's just say Africa and America, but also the Caribbean, the UK, all across the globe where there are melanated people in, numbers and droves. You're saying that without the unification of all of us in each one of these, different land masses on the planet, you don't see that we can make it happen in regards to a successful revolution.
I don't see it. Now let me not give the impression of some oversimplicity.
Okay.
I don't believe that African people have a gift of uniting every single African human being on the planet that has never been demonstrated among any other people, right? In other words, that's a fancy way of saying I don't expect that, all you got to do is snap your finger with Pan-Africanism and all of a sudden all Black people come together. No, that's not practical. We don't see that. But to the extent that progressive movements and formations exist across the African world that are committed to those elements that I laid out, right? The economic upliftment of African people, the organized political upliftment of African people, the regeneration of African historical and cultural consciousness, the politicizing of that consciousness, movements based upon the reclaiming of Africans' place in history, the building of movements to liberate women from the unique conditions that affect our women. If those expressions, those progressive expressions, are not linked in some kind of way, we're going to have trouble, right? Because we don't have a mechanism that we can use to extend our interests as a people collectively, again, on the global chessboard, right? And, you know, this is, again, not fancy talk. We are seeing before us right now the extent to which many of the enemies of African people are united. That doesn't mean that they don't have conflict, right? That doesn't mean that every single European is walks in lockstep with one another. But when it comes to advancing their collective interests in different parts of the world, they have certain expressions of unity.
Yep.
So, you know, this is a human dynamic, right? And I reject the notion that everybody should be prepared to unite in the pursuit of their collective interests. But African people, you know, we have to be fundamental Black Americans, or we have to be, what's the other reparations entity?
I know FBA and there's a couple other ones, but I know
reparations. I know this. I'm just drawing a blank right now, but
I can't think of them either.
The reparations discussion that wants to limit it to just the experiences of Black people, African descendants, ADOS. 80
or 88 ADOS or something like that.
African descendants of slavery, right?
Yeah, I think it's ADOS, something like that.
Yeah. You know, so, you know, we don't assume that there will be some kind of operational unity that exists with everybody, including those who seek no or have no relationship with Africa. No, we don't presume to build Pan-Africanism with them. Right. And you know, that's not necessarily even get into a debate on their ideas, which I don't mind.
Right.
But
we can, because we got I see some comments and questions coming in. I wanted to ask a question though, because in regards to this, I agree with you on that. You're not going to have everybody get along, period. Like you can look at their family structure, and you know what I'm saying, if you got a household of a husband and wife and 2 children, you know that everybody ain't getting along all the time. You know what I mean? Or if you go extended, you got 5, 6, 7, 8 children. You know, certain siblings, brothers and sisters, are going to click with other brothers and sisters. They're going to be cool, and it might be like oil and water with another set. You know what I'm saying? So that there's always going to be conflict in human. You know, this is inevitable. But for the sake of a global, you know, movement or a global shift, which I'm seeing now, and I'm seeing like the you know, the Ibrahim Traores of the world, you know what I mean, coming along and making a huge impact for what is I'm looking at as he's giving us the blueprint. He's showing us what this looks like, you know, on a global scale. So I feel like it can be done. You know, you don't have to reinvent the wheel, kind of like what you know, it's come up in some of our conversations. But when it comes to this thing, when we're looking at all, you know, the major, I would say, milestones that we got to cross and hurdles we got to run through and run over, I love Neely Fuller's work, the Compensatory Anti-White Supremacist Racist Code book, and he speaks about the 9 different areas in which, you know, we've been, you know, pretty much dominated in, or not dominated, but at war in, you know, for some time now. So those major 9, we got economics, education, and entertainment, right, or entertainment. Out of those 3, which one of those 3 do you feel like is like, how would you list those 3 in levels of priority, and then how can we put together an action plan? Because I know we spoke about yesterday, you know, knowledge without application is a sin, right? So with those 3, where would you list like those 3: economics, education, and entertainment in regards to where we are now?
I don't. Before I answer that, I just want to comment on what you said with Brother Traore, because he's an important person, and he's doing important work as an individual. But I would, and I'm not saying anything that you don't know, dear brother. So don't let this sound as some kind of reaction to what you said. You just give me the opportunity to just share something that's really important. He is Ibrahim Traore is currently one of our most progressive young leaders who we are all proud of, you know, but we want to realize that he is not new in the sense that he doesn't represent a new expression in African leadership. There have always been individuals like him that we need to make sure we learn from. And it's important for us to know that there's been individuals like him in the past, that he's not, this is not the first time we've seen someone like him. But it's also important to know that because we need to anticipate and help protect him from what's coming at him, right? In other words, it's not useful to recognize Ibrahim Traore and not understand the story of Thomas Sankara, right? And the extent to which Ibrahim Traore is a new reincarnation of Thomas Sankara, right? We need to know the story of Patrice Lumumba so that we understand Ibrahim Traore better, right? And on and on and on and on. We need to understand the significance of Walter Rodney so we can understand this dear brother better. Amilcar Cabral, we need to better understand Amilcar Cabral and what he represented at a certain time in history so that we can better understand the fullness of Ibrahim Traore, not only in terms of his own personality and personage, but also the political chessboard that he's moving on, and then be prepared for. And it's important for him, and I'm sure he does, to know the world that he's confronting, so that he prepares the next Ibrahim Traore. He prepares his replacement, something that none of the others have been able to do. Right. So I just wanted to make that point so that we don't focus too much on this one individual, as opposed to seeing that which he represents. In terms of the three, dear brother, I don't know if I mean, can I be rebellious and just say I want all three of them?
Hey, that's why. Look, you answer. The answer is the answer. Look, I
don't want to rank them, man. I don't want to rank them. I want to say that they all exist not vertically but horizontally.
Mm.
And to our discussion earlier, we're human beings, right? African people are human beings.
Mm-hmm.
You're rocking the red, gold, and green. Another show host may be rocking the red, black, and green.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
I wanted to wear that, but I didn't get permission, so it didn't work out.
I
got the wristband, my watch band.
I say, right. We talked about Garvey. We didn't get a chance to talk about Garvey, but I prefer to have the images of Guinea-Bissau behind me, and then others can have other images. And so the point I'm making is that we're different.
Yep. And
we all have different roles to play because of the immensity, the totality of our struggle.
Yes.
Right. And so some of us, we must be educators. One of the, and you would notice, one of the really interesting stories of our ancestor now, the late Maladoma Somé, when he talked about the path that he had to follow.
Mm-hmm.
I remember being in grad school reading his books and coming to an understanding of where he was doing his work, where physically he was doing his work. And I could not wrap my mind around, and this was when I had just left the PWI and went to grad school at an HBCU, and just discovering all of the beauty that exists in being among our people, right? And I just was hungry for a Patrice Maladoma and others to be in our space.
Yes.
And I don't want, this is a long conversation in and of itself, so your audience would know that this much more complex than I'm making it here, but I just want to make this point.
Mm-hmm.
But when he tells his story and the task that was given to him spiritually and from the elders that he were connected to, he had a particular path that he had to walk that took him in certain places. And so what I'm getting at here is that we can't be expected to be fighting the same fight. Some of us are going to have to deal with the question of education. Some of us are going to have to deal with the economic question. And some of us are going to have to deal with the expressions that come together in the form of what we call entertainment or edutainment, as you said, entertainment, as you said. So that means my brother and I are having interesting conversations now about the young brother Kruger and the films that he's making. He's a gifted filmmaker, and he has to use that weapon to tell stories, and he's just getting started. All right, you can tell he graduated from Black Panther to Sinners. Now, I this is what I'm saying. I'm no film expert, so I could be dead wrong. But when I look at the work and compare to the works from Panther to Sinners, I see a brother who is growing in his path that he has to walk. And man, I can't imagine what's coming next from this brother. And I've been saying for a long time, I'm sick and tired of all of the slave biopics, right, or the slave narratives. Yeah, it's important to tell the story of slavery over and over and over again. It's important, but let's tell some other stories, right? Let's tell some other stories. I can't wait for the story. For example, the next movie on someone like our apprentice Bunchy Carter. Imagine that story. Carlos Cooks. Right? Somebody tell that story, right? Right. There are other stories that must be told, and so we need those filmmakers to do so. And think about this. Remember, in the 90s, you might not remember this. In the 90s, we had movies like Daughters of the Dust. And we were hungry for a continuation along those lines, and then it stopped, right? But maybe it didn't stop. It just means now that we have a newer generation of young filmmakers who will clearly tell the story of the unique experiences of African women in the various spaces that they struggle in, right?
Yeah.
Sankofa, Haile Gerima's movie Sankofa. We need someone to come back and pick up some aspect of that movie, right? Whether it's I spent the last 3 summers in Ghana and spent a lot of time at the dungeons. And every time I'm there, thinking about the opening scenes in Sankofa, right, where she's in the dungeons, and what she says, right? I don't want to give it away to the listeners who haven't seen it. I think your audience have seen it.
I'm pretty sure they have. And that's a whole nother show we got to have one day, man.
But listen to what she says, right? That could be a whole movie by itself.
Yeah.
Right. And then at the final scene where Nunu is sitting there looking at her, and the look that they share with each other, right? That's a film by itself.
Yeah.
Because those are unique realities of the experiences of African women that our filmmakers need to make. So what I'm getting at here is that I don't want to rank the role of those brethren and sisters beneath the educational question and the economic question, especially the economic question, because I'm writing a book right now grappling with the debates among African-centered thinkers and Pan-African nationalists on the one hand, and the debates with the Marxist-Leninists, Pan-Africanists on the other hand, that centers around the impulse to reduce other expressions of our struggle beneath the economic class question. I resist that. I reject that. And quite often, if we're not careful, we would answer your question just now by saying, well, the economic question is the most critical question and everything flows from that, right? Man, that debate goes back decades, 100 years at least in our community, where and it was a debilitating debate that has had tremendously negative impacts on our ability to organize and do work. All right. So yeah, I don't want to rank them, man. I want to say, let us stand together, and we'll say, all right, a third of you go in that direction. The other third, you all go over there. I'm gonna go here and up the middle, and we'll meet at the end, right? And we'll do them all simultaneously. You're muted there, brother.
Yeah, my bad. I had cough. But yeah, I didn't even see that it went on mute. But I feel like we have to address all 9. Like, and I pose that just for the sake of of triggering thoughts.
Now, hold on. You said 9, and I haven't read the brother's book, so I'm learning as I'm listening to you. But we mentioned 3, so help me see the connection between the 3 and the 9.
So the next 3 are going to be labor, law, and politics.
I see.
Right?
I see.
Yep.
Okay.
And then from labor, law, and politics, the next 3 is going to be religion, sex, and war.
I see.
So he hit that thing, man, and he
Yeah.
went into, he gave a dope blueprint. I mean, like I said, and you said this, several times in some of the in-person meetings we had, but the wheel has already been invented and created. All we
Yeah.
got to do is take what we need at this point in time
Yeah.
and take action on it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm gonna bring this question to the floor because I feel like it's definitely worthy of your thoughts, and then I got a few too. But Brooklyn Baby, shout out to Brooklyn Gabby, a baby. How can Black Americans be Pan-African when the whole continent of Africa is at war with each other? So I
Mm,
don't agree
mm.
that the whole country is at war with each other, but there is a lot of wars, and that is a legitimate question.
Nah,
So
that's an important question, and I appreciate the question because it gives me a chance to respond to it, right?
that's why I said I had to put that
I like
to
the
the side because
question.
I knew I wanted to bring it up.
Yeah, I like the question. I like the question. So I'll begin with this. So there's an important word that called perspective, right? Really, part of what we're dealing with is the perspective that one chooses to look at this, right?
Mm-hmm.
One could see the existence of conflict and strife as the reason for African unity, the demonstrated justification for Africans to unite, right? We can see a continent at war, and we know Africans are human beings, and we have to recognize the fact that we are human beings, and we know war is not a human norm, right? There's one person, well, I shouldn't say one person, but a famous quote that in many ways upholds the assumptions of the role of war and conflict for particular people was uttered by a military thinker by the name of von Clausewitz, right? And he argues that war is the expression of politics by other means. Right?
He got a book called On War, right?
On War, exactly right. On
Mm-hmm.
War, von Clausewitz. Now, let's pause for a second and think about that. War is an extension of politics by other means. Now, von Clausewitz didn't study African people. In fact, what he was talking about was the expressions of warfare among Europeans, and he was primarily concentrated on the First War. All right. So that statement is not a statement of universality. That's a statement that belongs to the European experience. And we should not assume that war, if it's an expression by politics by other means, that means that war is as normal as politics are. And that's not a human dynamic. Right? That doesn't mean that people don't exist in conflict. Conflicts always exist, but in terms of war, we should not assume that that's norm. Now, if we're going to agree that war that we see unfolding on the African continent is not normal, then we must ask ourselves, what is it that we need to do? What is it that we need to understand war to be as it exists? It exists as a manifestation of something else. It's a manifestation of something that's not normal. So the question then becomes, well, what is it that we can reach for to help us eradicate this abnormality, right? And so again, I don't say that we should pursue a level of Pan-Africanism just for the hell of it. No, we want to pursue it to help liberate ourselves from any abnormality that presents us from reaching our full humanity, right? So yeah, we have to struggle against this problem of conflict. All right, so that's one thing. Let's take that and put it to the side. Now let's be historians for a second. Right? I don't believe that Africans lived in a kind of utopia before Europeans came and Arabs came, and then we all of a sudden started existing in conflict. We had our own conflicts, but our conflicts were different. Right? I said a moment ago that the contemporary reality on the African continent cannot be separated from the realities of the nation state. So if we're going to understand that there's a condition on the continent now called war, we have to grapple with the causes of these wars. And I contend right here that one of the most important causes of war in Africa is the failure of this new political entity that Africans adopted called the state and the collapse thereof. Right? Upon independence, the contemporary conditions in Africa right now is directly connected to the realities that emerged after the independence movements, when many African states gained their independence, gained their sovereignty. Right? And you can draw a direct line from the contradictions and the difficulties that came after independence to the conflict that exists on the continent now. Right? Now, so we have a problem that we're still working through. Now, keep in mind, it took centuries to create this problem. The continent has only been free from colonialism, colonialism and direct colonial domination just yesterday. So we are still in the process of liberating ourselves. We're not done yet, right? So we're still in the process of becoming more human, becoming more African. Now, if I'm correct on this point, what that means is that we are struggling against an enemy. We're still struggling against an enemy. You with me? All right. So if we're still struggling against an enemy, then part of our continued struggle is to understand what the enemy's goals and interests are. And I just saw this documentary titled Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. Have you seen it?
No, I haven't seen that one yet.
You got to see this one, dear brother. You got to see this one.
What is it called again?
Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat. It's on, or it may be soundtrack for a coup d'etat, but it's on it's a documentary on the assassination of Patrice Lumumba. You know, all we really had prior to that was a film by Raoul Peck, Lumumba, right? Which did a great job back in the maybe mid to late 90s. But since then, we really hadn't had a serious treatment of Lumumba's assassination. And this documentary, you got to see this and you got to study it, man. You got to give yourself time to really, you might have to be able to pause it and run it back.
Listen,
those kind of films, right?
That's what I'm going to ask. How do you spell the last part? Because I got to make sure I get that. You said the soundtrack for, how did
a coup d'etat, COUP.
Oh, okay. I got you.
Okay, I got you. Yeah. Coup d'etat. But the reason I cite that is to make this point. In that film, they're able to demonstrate, and this is just an anecdote, right? You know, this is not new. This has been analyzed and studied and worked out in much more deep and systematic ways than, you know, simply a documentary. But what this documentary did, to my surprise, is that it emphasized that one of the key interests of the colonial powers who are seeking to maintain ways to control Africa after its independence was to undermine all expressions of Pan-Africanism, not necessarily communism or socialism, which was important for this film because Lumumba's assassination occurs in the context of the Cold War. The emergence of the African state is a product of the Cold War, right? And so it's easier to frame the undermining of the African states, the undermining of African people, to the extent that we have conflict now as a product of the Cold War, right? Which is seen as a struggle against communism by Western democratic forces. Nah, what we have here is a struggle against Pan-Africanism. So the Western powers were clear that the threat that Lumumba represented was more a threat towards a threat of African people uniting to the detriment of European control of the African continent, as opposed to some foreign idea being imported into Africa that threatened the West. It was the fear of African people coming together. This is what they're fighting against. And so one of the ways that they fight against that is by perpetuating conflict and finding ways to undermine Pan-African unity. And I mean, sometimes it's real simple. Sometimes we have to gravitate to what our enemy is against.
Yes.
At the very least, think about what our enemy is against.
Yeah.
Right. And so what I'm saying to this great important point, we should not draw the lines to say conflict bad, therefore Pan-Africanism is bad. And please don't let me oversimplify the question that the person raised, because I don't want to do that, and I apologize if I give that impression.
No.
It's too easy to draw that connection between conflict, disunity, and therefore the lack of relevance of Pan-Africanism. No, it's the other way around. This is one of our weapons. It's not the only weapon, but it's one of our weapons. And we can't lay it down, right? We can't lay it down because the reality of its need is still so prominent. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and listen, it makes perfect sense to me, and to kind of bring reference to some of the comments because there's a lot of dope comments in there, and unfortunately, because of our time, I probably won't be able to get to all of them, but I still want to reference them because they're
We'll get
dope
the minutes we
insights
can.
to the oh yeah, the dope insights to the conversation. But it goes down to I'm gonna bring back the other question from Brooklyn Baby because this was another one. So there are countries that are giving out citizenship. I know Ghana's one for sure. I actually have access and relationships to people in Ghana who's able to do that. So that's something that we personally have a hands-on, boots on the ground team over there to do with Ghana. And then if I'm not mistaken, Bobby Mukasa Dada told me that Burkina Faso is also another one that's doing it.
Yeah. I love that brother Daly is one of my very dear close friends. But yeah, you answer that. I don't need to know if there's anything else I need to say to it.
Yeah, and there's several more too. So
but again, I'm a political scientist, so I have a hunger for the political analyses, right?
Mm-hmm.
We should not underestimate the kind of pressure that's placed on heads of state to force their governments to behave a certain kind of way or not behave in another kind of way, right? And this is I'm not supporting this. In fact, this is what I want to struggle against.
Mm-hmm.
But we should not use the behavior of heads of state who are under. Let me be real. Say what I really feel. Who are either cowards or who are under immense pressure to advance not the interests of the state that they lead, but the interests of the international community to which they feel as though they belong. Who will adopt policies that are antithetical to Pan-Africanism. Again, we can't blame Pan-Africanism for that. Right? Because again, as I said at the beginning, I don't measure Pan-Africanism by the behavior of heads of state, some of which, as they do in Ghana, it is a part of the fabric of the society to welcome Africans back home. Whether you went through the DNA test and found your origins to be in among the Ashanti or the Akan or whomever, right? They don't put that requirement. They just say, "Come on back home."
Facts.
And I will say this: my experience has probably been in West Africa. Wherever African people go back, quote, home, it's the same kind of welcome and embrace. Welcome back home, brother. Welcome back home, sister. And these are people who they're not attached to the state. They have no power in determining who gets citizenship or who doesn't. Right? It's built into the fabric of our relationships with each other. Tell your story. I'll tell you a story. Tell you a quick story, and then we'll move on. And this has to do with Pan-Africanism being grounded in the spirit and the fabric of our relationships as opposed to the policies of the state. Right?
Mm-hmm.
I was in St. Martin a few years ago, and a brother named Shuja Reef, powerful brother. He's a part of the he's a part of the decolonization movement in St. Martin, because St. Martin, the island of St. Martin, is still a part. Its sovereignty is still
crown, right?
Say again?
It's still connected to the British crown, right?
Well, not the British, the Dutch.
The Dutch, okay.
And then other parts are connected to the French, if my memory serves, right? I think the island is literally cut in half with one
kind
side.
Like Haiti. Yeah, how they did Dominica and Haiti.
Yeah, sort of, not like that, but again, those states are sovereign. St. Martin isn't.
Gotcha.
And so anyway, the brother tells a story, and I'll repeat his story every chance I get, where he went to Senegal. And he said when he went to Senegal, he met a brother and an elder, and the elder, I think he was there for a week. Shuja met the elder when he first arrived in Senegal. The elder said that I will see you before you leave to go back to the state or go back to St. Martin. And so Shuja said when they were getting ready to leave and they were on the bus, I guess it's somewhere in the afternoon, he sees the brother walking up, who he had seen the first part of the trip. And so he got off the bus right before they get ready to leave, and he gets off the bus and he goes to embrace the brother, the elder who has come to see him. And I don't remember the exact exchange, but it was something like this. The brother says, I had to come back to see you because last time you left, I haven't seen you for centuries. All right. So the brother walked. He ended up walking about 2 hours away by foot to come to see the brother to bid him goodbye, because last time, and this was Shuja's first return. So for the elder, it was a symbolic gesture to walk back 2 hours by foot to say farewell, or maybe to see you next time, right? What I'm saying is that this is what waits for us. And these people who I argue, as I started earlier, it represent the essence of the spirit of Pan-Africanism. They don't have the control of the mechanisms of the state. So we can't minimize their expressions of Pan-Africanism because of the misbehavior of those who have the ability or the unwillingness to extend citizenship. You see, this is much more complex than the way we have been taught to see and relate to one another by the same enemy that we share on both sides of the Atlantic. How we let them tell us the way that we measure our relationships with one another.
I love that story and the metaphorical representation of the story, because that's real. And you know, we spoke about that, I think either yesterday or a couple of weeks ago when we were together, in regards to how, you know, we feel some type of way here in America, you know, in the Turtle Island aspects of, you know, where we are geographically located right now. We feel some type of way, right? As a consensus, I think a vast majority of those who identify with having an ancestral lineage that is connected to the continent identify with the feelings or the thoughts or the expressions or experiences of betrayal, stabbed in the back, given away, you know what I'm saying, sold off, all that. But that's not a mind. I'm just saying there's some people, just for the sake of conversation, some people have that, you know, mentality, right? But you posed something to me that I had never thought about, and I've been blessed to visit the continent, and I've had experiences over there in Ghana, in Nigeria, you know, in different parts of the continent. But me personally, it was nothing but love. Like, I felt like royalty over there when I moved, because it was nothing but everybody showed love. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I ain't gonna say there wasn't some BS, because you can't go nowhere where everything's perfect. But I have to say, overwhelmingly, 97% of my experience was nothing but love and embracing and welcoming. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was it.
You know what? You made me think about something I think we talked about, and I want to repeat here because of the first two questions that you asked. Let me connect these dots, if you allow me to. I just want to tell this, have this conversation here. There's this movie, right? When my daughters and I, and my wife and daughters and I, we get together, we just love to, you know, get the band back together and watch, you know, films that they like and just enjoy being in each other's space. And one film that we all love to watch is this Endgame film. Endgame, I think that's the name of it.
You like the third person told me I gotta watch that movie. I gotta watch that movie.
But not just for entertainment. See it in the context of what I'm going to share now.
Got you.
Well, I shouldn't say that. You should see it from your own perspective.
No. You like the third, at least the third or fourth guest. I promise. That told me I got it. I'm gonna make it a point to watch that movie.
Right, so I won't repeat the whole storyline, right?
Okay.
But of course, the movie is famous for the antagonist's ability to struggle for all of the power symbolized in these gems, right? But it's really a struggle for power. And what is it that one will do if one has ultimate power? That's the analysis, right? What is it that one can do if one has ultimate power? Will it humble them, or will it make them some other kind of monster? Well, this dude gets the power, and he snaps his finger, and half of the beings in the universe disappear, evaporate. Some of them, Brother Bemi, in the presence of their families. So when I was in Ghana, at a place called Asim Manso. Now, we all hear about the dungeons, and I'm sure you've been to Cape Castle and I think you said you were just recently at Amina Castle, right? Gorey Island and these other places. We know the slave dungeons, but there's this place called Asim Manso, the place of the last washing. Brother, that to me was one of the most emotional experiences I've ever had as a human being. All right. And this is a place where Africans, after trekking hundreds of miles for weeks from the interior to the coast, going through all kind of horrific experiences, where, for example, those who would be more sickly or more vulnerable by way of health may perish. They would put them at the front of the line or at the exterior of the line, so that when they know they're going to be attacked by animals, they'll attack them first. All right? Where women would be mistreated with all kind of unhealthy ways of dealing with their natural cycles. Right? Where elders will be just literally walked to death in this track to the coast. But the tour guide, that's not the word I want to use. Say for lack of a better term, the guide, not tour guide, the guide tells a story that I think frames Pan-Africanism perfectly for those of us in the diaspora, particularly those of us who have an animosity towards African for the feeling, as you say, of being betrayed. Think about this. Going back to the film, right? And the total disappearing of one's loved ones. The brother says, imagine in the daily routine of your life, or daily routines of life, where fathers must leave the family for a routine task such as work or sustenance, where children leave the house or leave the village or leave the space to go to school. Routine moments of dispersal and then coming back together, right? That one day, this is the brother said, imagine one day, one by one, your family members stop coming home and you never see them again. Imagine the trauma that family will go through. Not just the mom or the dad, the entire family. Because we know in the African continent, the main unit of social organization is not the nuclear family, it's the extended family, right? So imagine over a period of time, over hundreds of years, it's heartbreaking to think of it like this, that your people disappear one by one and you never see them again, and you have no ability to find them or fight back. Think about that for a minute. We know that there's something called post-traumatic slave syndrome in the United States. This work has been done by DeGroy and others who've gone and studied. This work has been done by the African-centered psychologists, one of the most important contributions of the African-centered psychologists. People like, as we mentioned, Wade Nobles and Francis Cress Welsing, Bobby Wright, who wrote the book, The Psychopathic Racial Personality. Who am I forgetting? One of my colleagues, Dr. Christopher Bass at Clark Atlanta University. They have done a wonderful job of explaining to us the intergenerational transmittal of the horrors of slavery in the psyche of our people. We only talking about that in the United States. That's only one side of the story. The other side of the story is the same kind of trauma that extends from generation to generation at home on the continent. So just think about your own family, Brother Bemi. You have children, right? I know you put a lot of time in your relationship with your son or son.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
My life revolves around my daughters, brother. It's not complicated. Everything that I do is grounded in them. Mm-hmm. And they just disappear one day. Well, that's the trauma that exists on the African continent. How dare us reject them, and they're dealing with the same kind of trauma? I shouldn't say the same kind, it's different, because we have a different set of experiences in the West. Mm-hmm. Exactly, PTSD, right? Post-traumatic, post-traumatic
stress disorder.
Right?
Yeah.
But what I'm getting at, man, let me just be accurate. Be precise. What I'm getting at here is that we got to rethink this tension that we have. We said on the one hand that the tension on both sides of our debates stem from the misinformation that comes from both of our enemies. So the information that we're using, that we're mad at each other about, comes from at least an unreliable source, right? Not to mention a discredited source. Then we build these animosities based upon faulty information that we have about each other's views of one another. And then we understand that Pan-Africanism has never sat in the middle of the space just unwelcomed by everybody. No, it's been resisted by those who have power. All right, go back and look at our main Pan-Africanists and the fate that they faced. I named a few of them already. Right. The main threat that Garvey posed was not that he was trying to take all Black people back to Africa. He never said that that was his goal. The main threat that he posed was nation building in the belly of the beast. And I say beast plural, nation building of African people wherever we were, and the linking of our struggles, the linking of our nation building the nation building efforts in all parts of the African world. That's the threat of Marcus Garvey, not him trying to get a boat and take every African back to the continent. He never said that. Right? So the interests of those who oppose us to divide and conquer us, the interests of those who oppose us to tell false narratives about ourselves, and our inability to feel the humanity of our brothers and sisters in other parts of the diaspora, we can't build our divisions based on that. And we can't justify divisions based on that. We can't be mad at each other based on that. We just got to find ways to talk. And I'm an old ball player, right, man? I'm an old football player. So I remember being personally pissed off at some of my old opponents, right? And to the point that football is a violent sport, and you play violence.
I played. Yeah, I know.
So you understand, right? And it's easy to be so mad at your opponent that you just want to destroy them. But then you meet someone and you just talk.
Yep.
And you realize that this is the coolest person that you ever met, right?
Yeah.
And the only reason that you have such animosity towards them is because of the nature of the game that we play, which is a very violent game.
Yeah. And
so your opponent can only be violent, right?
Yep.
But anyway, that's probably a far-fetched.
Nah, that's a real thing because listen, I had a it's funny because we spoke about that. I think it was yesterday's meeting actually about sometimes it's necessary for teammates to fight. Like I'll never forget when I played football, man. I was like 12 or 13, and one of my teammates, it was at practice. One of my teammates hit me, and I felt like it was a late hit because the coach had already blew the whistle, like the player was dead. He hit me, so I'm like, okay. So like on the next play, I come back, I crash him, and then I'm swinging on him, I'm hitting him under his pads, like I'm getting it in because I'm like, you know what I'm saying? I'm giving you back what you gave me. Yeah. But it was just funny because my coach, I was a real little skinny dude too, man. But the dude, he was a big dude or whatever, a big white boy. But my coach was like, you got some fucking balls. You got balls. You didn't play like that. It was funny because it ignited something not only in the coach, but it went back to what was said yesterday by your brother about it made us stronger as a team. Like it was like a catalyst that really kind of brought the team together, and we went out and we got it in the next few weeks. You know what I'm saying?
But the metaphor is, as beautiful as that story is, the metaphor is the way that we relate to each other is many ways dictated by the system that we belong to.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And what we're being taught as being participants in that system.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because if you and that brother met each other in another space and you just kind of start vibing, man, you would have not crushed the brother. He would not have crushed you. It's because we were participating in a sport that requires us to be violent to one another.
Facts. Mm-hmm.
And to the comparison here is that we don't control the mechanisms. We have not been able to control. We control some. We now have been able to control all of the mechanisms of relationship building. We don't control them. Before we even get to the continent, we've digested a healthy, fatal dose of anti-Africanness.
Yeah.
And if we don't make a conscious decision to say, all right, I'm going to purge myself of everything that I've taught about Africans, then we're going to carry that with us.
Yeah.
And they too have all they see about us. I shouldn't say us. All they see about Africans in the diaspora is hip hop music.
Yeah.
Now that was powerful, and images on TV, right? Wives of this and the wives of that.
Yeah. Reality shows and all that.
Yeah, reality shows, right? But we don't control those. We don't control that media.
No. But now, you know what's deep though?
Let me say this real quick. Now shut up. Mm-hmm. Now, what happened when we were pumping out progressive music, revolutionary music, uplifting, politicized music? We call it conscious rap, and how that was being transmitted across the Atlantic. That same documentary I was telling you about, it doesn't talk about rap music, but it talks about the jazz artists and how the jazz artists become mechanisms for extending notions of liberation across the African world. Right?
Yeah.
That's the control. All right, I'm sorry, brother. I cut you off.
No. You're good, because like it's healthy dialogue. But my thing is there's so many different dynamics to this situation, and that's why, like, because I've had some people come in here with the foolishness of trying to create separation and division, because those are the ones who, you know, that identify with America and Turtle Island and all that, and that's cool. I'm cool with that. I respect that, all that, because at the end of the day, my job is to come here to be someone who's unifying all of the tribes, or all of those who have the ears to hear and all those who have the eyes to see. That's what my job is. That's what I was sitting here for. I don't even like social media. I'm on here because I have to be obedient to spirit, because I done got my spiritual ass whippings before. I don't want no more of them. So I'm going to do what I was told to do. But at the same time, I feel like we have been hurt and traumatized so much. We're not even willing to accept listening to a different concept, listening to a different perspective, because you never know how you're going to be able to see things when you're looking at it from outside of your own personal, view or your own personal experience, because you can't see the picture if you're in the frame, right? So if you're looking at it from a lot of different angles, you can see that whole picture. I mean, you can see it clear, but if you're looking at it just from your own one mind's eye sighted line of sight, you're not going to be able to see everything. So you're going to be limited, first of all, with your view. And then second of all, you're going to lose access to the opportunity of connectivity to the bigger picture, which is the grand scheme of things of what's happening. So that's where I feel like there's so many different dynamics, because some people in Africa don't even know about slavery. They don't know that ever existed or happened. You know what I'm saying? Some people, it's so many different dynamics and perspectives they have. But one thing I know, and I'm pretty sure you've heard of it, is when a lot of people come from Africa to visit America, there are certain indoctrinating films or trainings or sessions that they have to be exposed to. So they're being programmed to look at us like we are Negro that ain't shit before they even step foot on this land. So there's so many different variables that go into this whole, division, aspects of what we're being faced with.
Yeah, man. And the key, I shouldn't say the key, because I don't want to give any overly simplistic. This is a struggle. Everything that you just laid out is just simply one line of struggle that we have to fight through. And I think we sleep better at night when we realize the totality of all that we've gone through and what we have to deal with. It's like when you it's like, Ace, check this out. When you were walking, back in the day when you used to walk everywhere. I mean, even when you're driving somewhere long distance, and you, in your mind, you're thinking, okay, I'm almost there. Then you see the sign, destination 100 miles away. You're like, oh my. You want to turn around and go back home because you didn't realize there's still that much longer to go. The point I'm making is that once we have a bird's eye view of the struggle and the immensity of the struggle, then it becomes a better psychological adjustment that can be made to engage in struggle. And then it also allows us to pick our line, because we can't do it all, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
But I want to share this story with you. In terms of that kind of reflects the importance of not knowing and understanding even the most knowledgeable among us. And I'm certainly not one of them, but where even our best intentions sometimes require more dialogue. So my dad transitioned in 1979. I was 10 years old. Never forget, at the burial, seeing just, you have these images, right? Just the whole process of burying him. In my family, whenever someone transitions, the family, we bury him. We don't allow the workers.
The funeral department or funeral.
We put the dirt on them until the last shovel, right?
Sure.
And so I remember seeing that, and I can remember the clinking of the shovels on the stones, right? So that was when I was a kid. When I was a young man, I went back and I was determined to come back with a rock. And I still carry that rock with me. It's in my bag right now, along with some other stones that my wife gives me as I travel. So I have this rock. And so I'm thinking, in the same spirit of remembrance, when I go to the continent, I want to bring back a rock. All right. And so when I go to Asim Manso, I started telling the story of Asim Manso. This is an important part of that story. So when I went to Asim Manso for the first time, And by the way, for the listeners who haven't gone to Ghana and those who hadn't had a chance to go, a sea monster is like a lagoon. It's like a lagoon created by a river, and it's about maybe 15 minutes, 20 minutes from Cape Coast Castle and in the interior, not too far, but it was a place where Africans were washed. It's called a place of the last washing because it's literally where Africans were washed and before being presented for purchase and then transportation across the Middle Passage. I hate to speak in such commodified terms, but that's the reality, right? That we were reduced to. And so that hence the name, the place of the last washing. And so when you go there, there are 3 burial sites side by side. And what surrounds each of the graves are stones, white stones. And so I said to myself, that would be an ideal place to draw a rock and take back with me, right? To keep with me because of the significance. And so the young brother that I was, a young brother, couldn't be maybe mid-20s at the oldest. And here I am in my mid-50s, right? And so I asked the young brother, is it okay for me to take this stone? Because they had it cordoned off with a ribbon. I said, it's okay for me to reach in and grab the stone. And he said, kind of reluctantly, I can tell he was reluctant. He said, yes. We went down to the lagoon. We participated in the ceremony, libations and truly a spiritual experience. And on the way back, I said, all right, let me grab the stone. And so I said to him one more time, is it okay if I grab the stone? And then he says what was really on his mind. He said, are you taking it back to America with you? I said, yes. And he was quiet. And then he says to me, do you think it will be happy there? And that response blew me away. But because what it represented was even in the best intentions, there are aspects of our struggle that we just can't comprehend, right? We can't even think through because we don't have a relationship with each other that allows us to build. But what comes from that kind of experience is now the opportunity to see the world from their perspective, right? Now, here I am. I like to think that I understand the essence of African spirituality. I've studied it, right? I participate as an active member of the African spirituality and African practices, right? I understand the way Africans see the world in different ways from Christianity. But in my haste, in my enthusiasm to do something that I thought was a part of my own personal tradition, my own personal family tradition, I missed a critical part of the experience, right? And so what's the point here? The point here is that I could only come to that deeper appreciation after being engaged with one of our brethren and sisters from the continent, as opposed to somebody mediating my understanding of Africans from thousands of miles away, and then going to Africa, looking at those brothers and sisters through the lens of something that someone else gave me, right? This relationship, this ability to relate and communicate with each other becomes an important part of us breaking up these negative perceptions that we have of each other, you know. And, you know, so I tell that story every chance I get because again, man, I'm 56 years old now, man. I'm still hungry for knowledge, but here I am learning from someone less than half my age. Just a question, just a basic question. It wasn't no elaborate dialogue, man. It was just a basic question. Yeah. You think you'd be happy there? And I left that stone right there. You see? But it only comes through dialogue, right? Exchange with the brethren, with the brother.
Yes.
And just as Brother Shuja had that new understanding of time and space based upon his relationship with that brother who he just happened to meet. And keep in mind now, Shuja said that this was just a chance of just a brother he just met in Senegal, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's an important way to get past this nonsense, man.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's facts. And we got some dope comments in the tribe. Shout out to the Unique Tribe, said unite despite agreement. I agree with that 1,000,000%, 1,000,000,000%, because that's real. And also, you hit a lot with that. I know we're running close on time, so I'm gonna try to be brief and efficient with the little bit I have left. But you hit a lot with that last transmission, that last answer, that last message, and it made me think about a lot of different things. Because one, shout out to G Force. Everything is conscious. So that rock does have a consciousness. That rock is a living entity. You know what I mean? Even though it's a rock, it's still a part of the grand scheme of things, the grand, creation of Mother Earth. And rocks are very significant, especially in the Yoruba tradition, when it comes to consecrating the shrines of the deities.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's
So it's
right.
like you're talking about a very significant,
Right.
Piece of, an element of the planet. So that's very powerful in regards to who and what we are as a people. And one of the best definitions I've ever heard.
It was white. It was white.
Mm,
right? Yeah. I don't know if I said that, but that was an important part of it. Yeah.
And that goes about how deep this thing is with spirit. So even with you sharing that last part, right? When we first started, we talked about the RBG, and I wanted to wear my RBG hat. I it came up in my eTie that I'm not supposed to wear all black anymore, and then there's different levels of things that I can't do, right? That's taboo. So I asked, because of the topic of today's conversation, and one of my favorite hats like this is my RBG hat. So I went ahead and asked Baba Obatala if I could wear the hat just for the show, Baba. That's it. He was like, yeah, nah, you ain't rocking that. so I had to go ahead and rock the white. So, but I really wanted to do the black, red, black, and green one, in honor of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey, the honorable ancestor, man.
That was the right decision. That was the right decision.
Oh yeah. I ain't playing with that. So, but I say all that to say that when it comes to this thing that we call a connection, that is profoundly accurate, because when he said, do you think that it would be happy there, that reminds me of like how we both were able to share two different sides of experiences of how both people from this part of the globe feels in regards to the perspective and the lens that they're looking through, and how our brethren over in Ghana felt, or on the continent felt, from their own perspective. Because before you shared that with me, I don't know if I've ever heard anybody say that. Even when I was over there, I don't remember anybody saying anything like that to me. You know what I mean? So it was like, that was a profound, I feel like, exchange, energy exchange, communication exchange between you and the brother. And I also feel like spirit spoke through him as to why, you know what I mean, that came out the way it did, and why it made a profound impact. And it brought me to one thing that I love about wisdom or knowledge or, communication is, you're never too old to learn, you're never too young to teach, right? So I got, my nephew's like 9, and he's been able to do things and say things like that from the time he was able to talk. I'm like, this dude is a Bible hour. Like, I know, you know what I'm saying? He has E5 written all over him, because he almost embodies the personification of a Rumula to me, because I have never seen anybody. I put it like this, and no disrespect to anybody, I've been blessed to meet some very profound minds and people in my path, but I would not trade level of communication and sheer serenity and composure with anyone else on the planet outside of him. And he's 9 years old. And the reason I say that is because his ability to articulate and communicate with people, and even say things that might make you feel some type of way, but the way he says it, how he says it, and the intentional energy in which he says it in is I've never seen anything like it. Never. 9 years old. It's like, I wish I could talk to people like that, especially in conflict, because he can say what he has to say, but you can't be mad at it, even if you don't agree with it, or even if he's right and you don't like it. For me personally, I can't be mad at it, because I know it was delivered with pure, good intention, like from his perspective. So I feel like if we can all kind of learn how to just a fraction of that collectively look at each other and respect who and what we are as a people, and then, what I'm saying, what we're here to do, take accountability for our role, our part, play that. I feel like there's nothing that can stop us if we could just love and respect one another's perspective.
And think about it like this. Maybe we're going to shift to something else, but you just made me think of something else on this point. In 2020, our young people took to the streets to protest the murder of George Floyd. And prior to that, we mobilized to protest other acts of violence, state violence against us, right? And then we're in a struggle right now to educate ourselves in a moment that will deem any kind of African history or African American or Black studies as being wokeism and therefore a threat to the state. We shouldn't be surprised by that, but nonetheless, it's a challenge. What I'm saying here is that we got all these expressions of our struggle, but one of the most prominent, profound struggles that we have is the struggle against the impulses that we've embodied to stand against one another. Right? That's a struggle. That to me is a concrete struggle that we have to engage in, where we fight against this the negative perceptions that we have. Now, let me be accurate. Let me tell one more story as we go to the next. Before you go to the next question, also when I was in Africa, there was a brother who was sort of in the restaurant, kind of cleaning up. It was a little late in the evening, and the brother was cleaning up, and you can tell, at least I got the sense that he didn't really have much to say to tourists. Right? And unfortunately, many of us go to the continent as tourists, right? And look at workers there as simply those who are there to facilitate our enjoyment. And so I said, let me try to talk to the brother. And so, because I'm just relaxing, just finished eating and didn't really have anywhere to go. So I said, all right, let me just try to talk and communicate with the brother. And the brother's really not responding, either because he has a lot of work and he's ready to go, or as I said a moment ago, quite often our touristy behavior leaves a bad taste in the mouths of our brothers and sisters who are there, who make their money serving visitors. But I didn't give up. I kept talking with him, and then I asked him a question. I told him a story about my daughter, and I told him that I asked him about a concept called Antobam. Does that word sound familiar to you? Antobam. It comes out of the Akan tradition. I think it's the Akan tradition. Antobam, right? And the brother perked up, and I said to him, I just learned that word because my daughter and my dad were born on the same day. I said, that's what I'm saying to him. I said, I had some conversation about the significance of that in Ghanaian culture. Can you give me a bit more? Man, the brother lit up, and he just held court for about 30 minutes. And he admonished, well, he didn't admonish me. He told me that is very important. Make sure you talk to her. Make sure she understands that.
Wow.
Make sure she understands the significance of her being born on the same day of her grandfather. He says because it symbolizes the fact that their souls were in communication with each other before she got here. Right? But brother, baby, look at the energy before the conversation. To me, to him, I am a tourist who's only there for him to make money to take home. At least that's the energy, right? He's not communicating with me. I'm trying to dialogue with small talk. And I'm not trying to make it sound like I set this up, but I'll just, explain to him the day. I'm like, yeah, man, I just got back from such and such, and I found out this, and man, the brother lit up, man, lit up. I'm saying the brother, he was actually an elder. He lit up and starts holding court. I guess he ended up leaving 30 minutes later than he was supposed to that night, right? But the point I'm making is that, this is the essence of the struggle to relate to one another in ways beyond that which is imposed upon us by those who control and have power over us.
Yeah, that's facts. I'll tell you what, yeah, this was everything I knew it was going to be. Yeah, look, and it's funny because I was taking notes the whole day. I got literally a full page of notes. I ain't even get the quarter of these damn questions, but it's all good.
Let's get some more because I feel like I've been talking too much.
God willing, nah, we good. But listen. We'll be on here all day. And then I gotta go pick up the packages from playing ball. So, but I did want to leave off on a note where I would like to get your final thoughts in regards to kind of like an overview of the whole entire conversation. And shout out to the tribe, man, because they was in here tribing. I said we don't normally go on midday like this, but I knew people would show up, the tribe would show up. So we did have like, I think almost 50 in here at some point today. And I appreciate y'all for showing up and showing love to Dr. Young, man. So, and we got a double header tonight, family. We'll be back tonight at 9 p.m. as well with another live stream. But real quick before we get out of here, when it comes to who we are and where we are collectively as a people, I love how you have a vision for what your own research, your data, your work that you've been doing. You've been doing phenomenal work, which we didn't even get to that with all the different levels of work that you're doing at Clark Atlanta, which hopefully we can get to that next time. But you have a very prolific, long-term, long-sight vision of what Pan-Africanism looks like to you. Can you share for us in closing, like what you see as like the areas and the significance of the type of work that we can do, or the information and knowledge that's being shared here at this channel, how we can apply that to further the narrative and push the issue forward with us continuously crossing off milestones on this process to liberation through the framework of Pan-Africanism.
Yeah, man, it can't be. Yeah, good question. It's a hard question, but it is the most important question, because we have to get to some praxis, right? Not just theory, but theory and action, theory and work, theory and practice. So let me take a shot at this. All right. We had a conversation earlier about lineage, and this is important. We have to locate ourselves personally in this struggle. We have to locate ourselves in that which we are advocating for, right? So Pan-Africanism can't be something that we speak to everyone else about. It has to be something that we do on a very basic level. So one of the, I think, concrete steps that we can all do is to locate ourselves. Again, I'm repeating myself and repeating Barbara Clark, Nana Clark. Locate ourselves on the map of human geography. Where are we from? Where are we from? Man, I tell you, one of the most liberating experiences I ever had as a student was learning, again, as depicted in the image behind me, that's an image of Guinea-Bissau, was learning that my people, through the technology that we have at our disposal and through the historical record that we can discern, we have some of that we can, in my family, we can map out based on what we know. We know some. But to know that I'm from Guinea-Bissau, and the way that it connects me to one of the most inspirational revolutionaries I ever read, Amilcar Cabral from Guinea-Bissau, right? And then also to learn that we are part of the Balante ethnic group, right? We descend from the Balante ethnic group in my family. That knowledge by itself puts my commitment to Pan-Africanism on a different level, because it's not just something that's an instrument to change. It's something that grows out of the essence of my existence, right? So that's one point. Take the time, if we can, to do our backtracking. And you all know what's going to come next. It's hard, right? It's hard because so much of our knowledge of ourselves has been destroyed. Not destroyed, it's been hidden from us or distorted. And we have to struggle to find it. So in some kind of way, I would want us to try to go back and locate ourselves personally in the struggle of time and space. Not just politics and economics, the struggle of time and space. Another practical step that we should take is to, as Kwame Traore said, Stokely Carmichael said so many times when asked what is it that we can do, he said, organize, organize, organize. You can tell I have a bit of a critique of the Marxist-Leninist line, notwithstanding the fact that I think that they have at least one part of the solution to our problem. But one thing Kwame Traore said that I believe and agree is to organize, organize, organize. Be a part of some formation that's grounded upon some notion of Pan-African unity. It doesn't have to be a political organization. It could be a spiritual organization. It could be a literary organization, a reading club, but some kind of work, a humanitarian organization, some kind of work that's diasporic, that's transnational, that links us to one another beyond the United States. All right, that's something else that we can do on a personal level. Be involved in something that's based upon this notion of relationships with one another. And you have some examples that exist. The Universal Negro Improvement Association still exists. They're still working, right? And then they have new organizations that are created. We have some that do specific work. One of the most inspirational organizations that I came across in my years of Pan-African research was a Ugandan organization called the Pan-African Women's Liberation Organization. All right. So there are entities everywhere that we can be a part of. We just need to seek them out. A third step that we can take on a very practical level is to read, and read. All right. There's so much at our fingertips now to learn about in terms of Pan-Africanism, and just search the term. That doesn't mean that every book that you read will come up in a search as a good book, but you can start reading everything that you can get your hands on about Pan-Africanism. All right. Put down the phone for a minute and read a book, or if you're going to use a phone, pull up a PDF of a book. I just found a book, So Spoke Uncle, talking about Haiti, written by Jean Price Mars, right? Who was one of the most important ethnographic thinkers that influences Aimé Césaire. Aimé Césaire influences Frantz Fanon, right? And he wrote a book called So Spoke Uncle, which makes the case that, and this is one of the first books that captures the essence, the African essence of folk, Haitian folk society. And in that book, he lays out a distinction between what makes Haitian people African and what makes the elite in Haiti Francophiles. Direct disconnection. He draws a direct critique of Haitians who want to be French, as opposed to Haitians who not just want to be African, but Africa lives in the very fundamental relationships that they have as human beings on Africa. Right? And that book just showed up online.
Wow.
It was written, I think it was published in 1926, maybe. And that book is hard to find. And in English at that, it was translated in English. Now, I'm not advocating, pirating people copyrighted information, but the point I'm making, and that's in the public domain by now. That's in the public domain, 75 years. But the point is that it's available. It's available. And so, and just the other day, I'm online and I see one of my heroes is Bobby Wright, as I mentioned a moment ago. I had no idea that they had videos of this brother circulating around on the internet. And it was just amazing just to be able to just have at your fingertips, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So that's a third phenomenon. Connect to the readings, be able to read. And the last thing that I would say that we have to do is to travel. We have to figure out a way. We spend a lot of money on bullshit.
Oh yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Put some money aside, buy a ticket, and travel. Go to the Caribbean first if you're not quite ready to go to the continent. Go to Jamaica. Go to Belize, where I'm from. Go to anywhere. Haiti, right? Go anywhere in the Caribbean. Go to Trinidad for a minute and view Africanness there. Go to Jamaica and see Rastafari and see what's African in Rastafari. Go to Cuba and see Santeria. Go to Trinidad and see Shango. Exactly. Go and just go see it, and then go to the continent if you need that. Most of us, a lot of people don't need that, but some people do. Yeah. But the main point is go travel and see African people in the spaces and the struggles that they're engaged in. And everywhere you go, if you come with the right spirit, they'll embrace you. When I went to the UK to study Pan-African movements in the UK, man, I'm ashamed. I'm ashamed right now because I haven't had a chance to go back and build on those personal relationships that I made in the way that those brothers and sisters embraced me.
Right? I share.
30 years ago.
Yeah.
So those are the 4 points that I would make there, brother.
I share. No, I appreciate it. Matter of fact, shout out to the UK, man. I think they're probably, it's either UK or Canada, but I think it might be UK. They're like the outside of the US, they rock with the channel the most. I could see the stats and all that, and where where people are doing. So big shout out to the UK, man, because they've been showing love on the channel.
I agree with that, man. Well, it was such a powerful experience over there, man, and seeing those brothers and sisters again. It goes to the power of traveling,
yeah,
right, and seeing the way those brothers and sisters have been battling against the same kind of systemic forces of white supremacism and capitalism that we've been battling here in the United States, and that's battling in South Africa, and that's battling in West Africa. Man, those brothers and sisters in the UK are clear. They're clear, and they're doing some serious work, man, on the ground. So I agree with that point.
That's facts. Yep. Shout out to Ancestral Voices too. They had did a documentary years ago with Professor Smalls.
Baba Smalls.
Yeah, I believe they're out of London as UK as well. So shout out to them. Yep, they're in the UK. Yeah, so it's a lot, a lot of us doing the work across the globe, man. So that's why, I was grateful for the alignment, man, and how, we aligned, and Baba Shabazz, and we got some big things that we're doing on and offline, and I'm looking forward to bringing through fruition, man, especially when we work on doing our thing, what we're going to do together as well. I can't wait to get that in motion and make this thing do what it do, for sure.
Always work to be done, brother. It's always something to do.
Yes, sir.
Work.
Yes, sir. That's big facts. Big facts. Well, before we get out of here, man, you want to leave the tribe with because I didn't even get to the literary work that you do, the writings that you do, and then of course you got a lot more that we definitely have to get into on the next show in regards to how revolutionary your department is, the political science of African studies department is at Clark Atlanta University. So that's something we had to have a whole nother call about. But is there anything that you want to share with the tribe, or where they can support your work or support the work you're doing at the university, or how they can kind of connect with you in any kind of way in regards to just support, and showing love and appreciation?
Yeah, I have a presence on Facebook. I'm like you. I don't do much. On the one hand, I have a bias against social media, but the other part of it is I just don't have time. I wish I had a fancy political answer to that, but it's just
the truth is the best one. Because look, both of those are mine. That's my truth.
I just don't have time, but I do. I will have to become more active, because a lot's been happening since I've gone dark on Facebook that I should share with the rest of my community and others who visit my page. So probably the spaces that I'm most visible on is Facebook and Instagram, and I use my name. I don't have any kind of fancy handle. It's just Kurt B. Young, and so you can find me there, and you'll be able to see some of the important work that we're doing in the Department of Political Science there, as well as I continue to show the work that we're doing in those spaces, and including the writings that I'm working on right now. A couple books that are coming right down the pike as we speak. So yes, Kurt Young on Facebook and Instagram.
I sure.
I got rid of X since this guy, what's his name? When I realized
Eli Musk.
When I move around on X, I'm putting money in his pocket. So I know I deliberately got rid of that totally. But so it's only those two places.
That's it. Yeah. That's what's up. No, I appreciate it. And I'll look them up, and I'll add the links to the show description. So I definitely appreciate you, Dr. Young, man. It's been an honor and pleasure. I knew it was going to be a powerful conversation, man. And look, we'll have to get into the work at the university. We got the library. That's something else I want. I know you got some dope books that you can recommend. So that's all things I'll build with you off here. And then when we get back on this thing, man, and make it do what it do, and I'll definitely present all that information for the tribe too.
All right, brother. You ask and I shall come. So I'm waiting on your call. So you let me know when you want to come back.
Ashe, man. I appreciate you. So, tribe, I appreciate all y'all who showed up today, man, for this midday Ashe. And like I said, we'll definitely see y'all again a little bit later tonight at 9 p.m. We're going back with the HPS Empress Yemaya Faye will be back today, man, to drop some knowledge on the divine feminine awakening. So that's going to be a good, interesting conversation as well tonight, man. But with that, I definitely appreciate you, man. I appreciate you taking the time to show love and share your words of wisdom with the tribe, man. And I look forward to doing it with you again soon.
Okay, brother. Ashe.
Yes, sir. Ashe. All right, family. So I appreciate y'all. Don't forget to please like, share, subscribe. I'm your host, Orisha Bemi. This has been another episode of the African Spirituality Experience. We'll see y'all in the next episode. We out, family. Peace. Odabo.
ẹni tó gbàgbé ilé sàpò ìyàgbọ́ tẹ́ǹtẹ́ ní takisa ní tàtàn ò bá padà sílé anítìjàkọ ẹja lọ pé eégún mo ṣe nígbẹ́rẹ́ ìpàkọ́ forsake not your ancestors and praise your.